So let us begin this session together by spending a few moments to calm and concentrate both our body and our mind. So we can start, whether we're sitting on the floor, on a cushion, or on a chair, we can start by sitting in a posture in which we feel well connected to the ground. And then from this stable foundation, feel that our back, the trunk of our body, is arising upright and straight. Yet at the same time, and very importantly, that we are completely relaxed. As our posture stills and as our mind withdraws and quietens a bit, we become aware of this rhythmic movement of our breath. It is very helpful in the beginning if we concentrate on the feeling that accompanies the breath, the feeling associated with the rise and the fall of our abdomen. So let us sit in a posture with our sternum slightly raised, upright, alert posture, which is nevertheless relaxed and comfortable. A posture that allows our breath to flow in an unimpeded fashion down to the very depths of our abdomen. Feel the air as it comes down and expands our belly, whose muscles are completely relaxed. And then, just as it flows in and expands the abdomen, it flows out once again. So allow the rise and the fall of the abdomen in this way. Allow it to occupy the center of our gentle attention. Meaning that if we discover that our attention has drifted away to some other object, be it a sound, a sensation, a memory of the past, or an anticipation of the future. The moment we discover that our mind has drifted away in this fashion to any object other than the rise and the fall of the abdomen, bring it back in a gentle, firm manner to the contemplation of the breath. This movement of our attention back from distractions, back to the object of contemplation, which in this case is the rise and the fall of the abdomen, should be done in a gentle, firm manner. But what does that mean, to be gentle and yet firm? Firm relates to our determination. To our determination to place our mind on its chosen object with stability. And to do it the moment we become aware that the mind has drifted away from the intended object. Not to be lazy or to indulge in the distraction because it might be interesting. But at the same time, this replacement of the mind on its chosen object should be gentle. In other words, we should be completely free of all recriminations against ourselves, any guilty feelings that we might have, such as, I have an unruly mind, I can't meditate, what a poor meditator I must be since I can't concentrate my mind. Or there I go again, being distracted by this object or that object. All of that mental chatter, all those judgments, all of that, let go of. It is enough simply to recognize where the mind's attention has drifted to be aware when it has left the object of intended focus, and then determined to bring it back to its original object. We need not congratulate ourselves, we need not blame ourselves, we just simply do it. Because we are aiming to stay in the present moment, and all of this mental chatter, all this judgment, all of that deals only with the past and with the future. And it interferes with our ability to stay presently aware of what is happening now. So just as we are relaxed in body, so too we should be relaxed in mind. And now that we have withdrawn our attention to some extent, so that we're focusing on the rise and the fall of our breath and staying in the present moment as much as we can, now it is time for us to take a series of 3 cleansing breaths, which I will again describe first, and then we can proceed to take afterwards. So in this cleansing breath, instead of allowing the breath to come and go as it will, as we have been doing, as we inhale, we intentionally pull the air in as long and as deep and as thorough an inhalation as we can, filling our abdomen completely. And beyond that, raising the diaphragm above it, and beyond that, expanding the chest. So it is a full inhalation. And when we have breathed in this way, using the abdomen, diaphragm, and chest, then we let go completely. Every bit of air that we have drawn into ourselves, we now let go. And with it, we let go of anything that might be an interference to us. If our mind is upset or busy, if it is rushing, if it is lethargic, if we have a worry, if we have a physical pain, anything that might be construed as an interference to a clear, calm mind, we let go of, completely let go of, as we let go of the breath. And then follow that by our second complete inhalation, filling up the entirety of our abdomen, raising the diaphragm, filling the chest, and then letting go once again, completely and thoroughly, followed by a third such breath. After which, we simply relax in a state of calm, clear, and choiceless awareness, remaining still and yet alert. So now, having reminded ourselves of the instructions, when we are ready, we can take this series of 3 cleansing breaths, and then afterwards remain quietly in a state of clear, alert awareness. And before, excuse me, before we bring this initial meditation to a close, let us use whatever concentrated ability we may have cultivated, whatever clear awareness we may have cultivated through these initial processes. Let us use such a calm, concentrated, and clear mind to pay attention not to the breath as we have been doing, but to our motivation. Reminding ourselves of exactly why it is that we have chosen to spend this time here in this environment, participating in these teachings. this motivation is just another self-serving thought based on selfishness, self-centeredness, my own welfare, if we are only looking to gain some momentary advantage of power or knowledge or fame or reputation or the like, we should recognize that all such motives are like pollution. They ensure that our mind remains unclear and contaminated. So if we discover any such limited motivation behind our presence here, we should let go of them in the same way as we let go of the exhalation, completely, having no more to do with them. Again, without guilt or recrimination, without thinking I am a bad person, just simply recognizing that these states of mind are the very cause of dissatisfaction and therefore are to be let go of. And in their place, cultivate as an expansive and as altruistic a motivation as we can, simply by recognizing that in this life we are not alone. In every direction that we might look, there are countless living beings who, like ourselves, want only to be happy, to live lives of fulfillment, to experience peace and well-being. And yet, because they have not yet awakened from the sleep of ignorance, are in fact running away from the causes of happiness and towards the causes of suffering and dissatisfaction. And all of these beings and all of these directions are members of our family. These are our fathers and mothers, our sisters and brothers, our friends, our companions, our neighbors. If we are to dedicate our life, if we are to dedicate our activities within this life, even the activities that we're going to engage in over the next 2 hours, it should be for the welfare of all of these beings. How foolish to select from these millions and billions of beings who all share the same aspiration for happiness and well-being. How foolish, how petty to choose from all of them just one and to make him or her the sole object of our wishes for happiness. And yet that is precisely what we do while we're under the sway of the demon of self-cherishing. It is as if our vast, expansive I, this 360 degree awareness has narrowed down to a tight, minute tunnel, focusing obsessively on just one being, as if he or she were unique, special, different from everyone else, and therefore worthy of our sole concern. So let us allow our interest, our attention, our thoughts of welfare to naturally expand. Be like the sun, who doesn't send its beams down in one narrow direction, but sends them out effortlessly in all directions. In the same way, let our concern for others wrap around ourselves completely, without discriminating friend from enemy, those who help us from those who harm us, but to dedicate our lives in general, and this coming activity in particular, to the ultimate welfare and happiness of all beings without exception. And then, during the activity that follows, if we discover that our mind has contracted or forgotten this motivation, we can briefly remind ourselves of it, so that this precious, compassionate motivation, concerned with the welfare of all beings and dedicated to their happiness, may them be the motive force behind all of our endeavors here. Now, typically, we try to set such an expansive motivation at the beginning of a session of whatever it is that we're engaged in. Then, during the main body of the session, we try to keep our mind focused on whatever is the topic, with as much concentration and continuity of intention as we can muster, together with a mind of faith. And then at the conclusion, we remind ourselves of our compassionate motivation and dedicate all of the energy created for the welfare of others. Now, last time, because there were the class was extended a few minutes towards the very end, and people had to leave, the dedication portion was skipped over. So today we'll try to make an effort to bring the class to a conclusion on time, so that we can do a proper and full dedication at the end. And therefore this session at least will have a proper beginning and middle and an end. So, welcome back everyone to this second of the 6 meetings that we're having on this 12th module, the Wisdom of Emptiness, as part of this Discovering Buddhism series here at Land of Medicine Buddha. And I've just discovered that the wrong person is sitting up here. Actually, I knew that even before day one, but I just became aware, and looking out into the audience, that this is more the case tonight than it usually is. So now what to do? Because I don't want to embarrass him by calling him up, I wonder if next week will work. Great. We are very fortunate. All right. So now I feel much better, because now it doesn't matter what mistakes I make tonight, because he'll fix them next week. So let me start by asking, how many people during this week that just passed, and this is not an exam. You're not going to be graded on this answer. How many people had an opportunity to read Lama Zopa's 4-page article, Seeking the I, as was recommended? Quite a lot of people. Very good. How many people memorized it? No? Yeah, if the article was an iambic pentameter, then maybe you could have memorized it. Okay, good. I'd really like to take this as the foundation for what I'm going to talk about tonight, because it's such a clear depiction of really the heart of the Buddhist meditation on emptiness, and it raises some issues that we will find appearing again and again as we expand our wisdoms of hearing and thinking and meditating on this subject matter, the wisdom of emptiness. All right? So if you have the article in front of you, you might want to bring it out. It's not absolutely necessary that you do so, but those of you who might want to follow along, you can do that now. Those of you who find that a distraction, or if you don't have the article with you, then it won't be much of a loss, because we'll try to refer to it in as clear a manner as we can. First of all, before starting, is there any, in reading this article, is there any outstanding question that hit you over the head like a mallet as you were reading it? Like, was there something you read that made you feel this just can't be right, or what could he possibly mean by this? You know, some really strong gut reaction, or if not that, at least a strong feeling of skepticism or questioning that came from reading this article? Yes, please. Thank you.
As a very much new beginner, I was thinking of the Jesuits. I was brought up with all their treaties on proving this and that about us and God.
Right.
And
right.
I heard
angels dancing on the head of a pin. That
yes,
kind of
those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I heard the argument that you can't prove a negative over and over, and that
so you can't prove a negative.
Yes, and even though all of this made sense in a practical way to help me with Buddhist psychology, I wasn't intellectually convinced, and I figure you'll remedy that tonight. But I think it was because I didn't.
Maybe not.
I think I didn't understand the gist of what he was getting at, maybe.
So you didn't understand the gist of what
I think I was missing something from not being convinced. So.
Okay. Now, is there anything very specific that you can point to that caused this qualm, or is this just the general tone of the entire article?
If I can express that, proving that the I, or stating that the I is not found in a specific spot, doesn't seem to me to prove that it doesn't exist on its own.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. I'll try to address that. Mm-hmm. Yes. So?
I get wrapped up in the language, so I hope I can explain this right.
Please.
When I look in the body, can't find it in the body. Look in the mind, can't find it in the mind. So when I got to the part where you disintegrate your body and disintegrate your mind, I'm left with awareness. And I want to know what the difference between awareness and the watcher is. Mm-hmm. And if awareness is Buddha nature, how is, if I feel like I am the awareness, who's unchanging and independent, how is that different from the soul?
Well, that's about 3 or 4 very, very difficult questions rolled into one. I mean, they are. Those are even among advanced schools of Buddhist philosophy. There are those who will posit that bare awareness itself is the self, is the I, and will hold on to that. That is not considered the highest view, but there are very advanced Buddhist thinkers who have come to that conclusion. So it is well understood if you come back to that. If you come back to that, that is as we try to cultivate our understanding. This is a position that we can come back to again and again, and yet ultimately it's a position that we have to get beyond. Okay, so I say that only in the sense that it's not. This is not the case that what is being presented here is a line of logical reasoning that at some point we're going to just become convinced of, and then we'll be free from the burden of self. It's not like that. It doesn't work that way. What is being described here is more a meditative process of first and most, and this is considered the most difficult part, this very first part, of first recognizing what it is we're holding on to. Then approaching that from different points of view to see that there's nothing that matches up to that idea, to that object. That object is actually a fictitious creation. Okay? But if first we aren't able to discern what it is that we're holding on to so obsessively, this sense of I that we're holding on to for dear life, if we can't differentiate that out, kind of weed that out, then there's really no way of proceeding, no matter how brilliant the logical argument is or how effective the meditative techniques that we're taught are. And it is said that it takes a very, very long time of continued investigation to begin to get that sense of what it is that we're trying to refute, what it is that we eventually have to let go of. So it's not something that's going to suddenly appear to us, and then with a great confident affirmation, we're going to say, that's it, that's the problem. It's a process of getting further and further refinement through experience. Okay, so this type of meditation that Lama Zopa is outlining here is something that we'll come back to again and again. And maybe in the beginning we don't even know what the terms of it refer to, what it means. Then as we get an understanding of that, it begins to allow us to let go of kind of gross, mistaken conceptions. But then as we come back to it and do the same, follow the same type of approach over and over again, or vary it somewhat with other similar approaches, we hopefully can remove more and more subtle objects to let go of. Okay? So, again, I say that just to indicate that the endeavor that we're embarking on here is a long endeavor. Only those people who have extraordinary instincts from the past fall into this with a correct, subtle understanding right from the beginning. Okay. I think I saw a question back there.
Sometimes I wonder, is this as difficult in Tibetan as it seems to be in English? Is it a translation problem, or
I don't think so.
A conceptual problem, or is it just as difficult?
No, I think I don't think it's a language problem. I don't think it's predominantly a language problem. I think there may be some things in the English language that could add a certain level of difficulty, certain habits we have to break. But I don't think it's that if you speak one language, it's easier, in another language, it's more difficult. Let me expand on what I was saying. For instance, I can say, at this moment, I can say, I am a man, or I am 61 years old. Right? Using the same English verb form, I can say, I am happy. All right? That's not the way language is used in every language. I don't speak Spanish, but apparently there is one verb to be in Spanish for something like I am 61 and another one for I am happy. Right? It isn't the same thing. And there are other languages which don't even have the verb to be in the same way. They might use something like 61 years pertains to me, or happiness is happening now, something like that, rather than using a verb form where you have a subject I and then some predicate and you're making an equation between it, right? And so there can be a variation in the language. But whatever language we choose, if we're here, right? If we're living in this universe, then the odds are we've done so because of grasping at an independent sense of self. That's why we were conceived. That's why we're born. That's why our life is perpetuated in the style that it is. And if we don't do something about it, that's exactly the way we will die and set in motion rebirth. Okay? All of that constellating around the sense of, as Lama Zopa uses in his language, a sense of a concrete, independent sense of self. Okay? So what we have to do is get an idea of what is meant by that, this concrete, independent, or to use other synonyms that Lama Zopa invokes here, self-existent or inherent or existing from its own side sense of self. What is really meant by that? So we're going to take kind of cautious baby steps in that direction today, all right? And remember, this is not primarily a logical investigation, where we're going to be able to put letters up on a blackboard and solve an equation and at the end of it say, therefore I don't exist. Come to some kind of conclusion like that. This is much more heartfelt. Right? Okay. So, let's start with language, however. Let's start with how we refer to ourselves, either when we're speaking or when we're thinking. Okay? So let's just come up with a selection of valid statements about ourself, about I, our individual I or me, or my name, John or Sarah or whatever our name is. Let's come up with just a smattering of representative, true statements about ourselves. Okay, so like I'll just start it. I or John am 61 years old. Okay, that's conventionally valid. If I've done my arithmetic correctly. Okay, anyone else? Just a smattering of a few things. Yes. I'm a little warm right now. Good, very good. Anything else? It's important. It's important that you do it. It's not important that you participate out loud, but it's important that while this is happening, you think about yourself and come up with a statement which describes something that's true for you right now. Okay? But of course, anyone who wants to participate out loud, that's that's very helpful to me and to everyone else. Yes?
I need to be up at 5:30 tomorrow morning.
I need to be up by 5:30 tomorrow. Good.
I have 2 children.
I have 2 children. Right? A few more? Just 3 or 4 more. Yes?
I'm Latina. I'm Latina.
I'm Latina. Good, good.
My back hurts.
I have a white dog.
Good. I heard one over here that was good.
My back hurts.
My back hurts. There, didn't have to use the...
I have to go.
Thank you so much, Mindy. My back hurts. There, didn't have to use the pronoun I, but my back implies I, doesn't it? Okay, so that's an excellent statement, all right? So now, and then please, even if you're keeping silent, say something in your, internally in your own mind that's valid about you right now. Okay? Now. Why could one of us say, my back hurts? Why was that a valid statement? Or I have an aching back would be the same thing, right? Why can someone say, my back hurts, or I have an aching back? Why could that be a valid statement? Yes?
We each live inside a body to some extent, and so we have more specific awareness of what goes on within our immediate area.
Very good.
Someone else.
That's exactly what I was looking for. That was exactly what I was looking for. In paraphrase, what she said was, we each exist within this body. In other words, when we say my or I, it's valid in this context because it's I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself in the sentence. When we say, I have an aching back or my back hurts, the reason why that's a legitimate statement is because there's a connection between the sense of I, the sense of self, and something going on in the body. Right? Okay? So we can make many valid statements using I, using self, using our name, referring to an activity taking place in or in relationship to this physical form. For instance, I can say at this moment, and I guess everyone else in the room can say, I am sitting down. And you can say, I am sitting down, because your body, our bodies, each of them individually, are in this configuration, in a sitting configuration. So because the body is in this sitting configuration, we can say validly, I am sitting. Okay? These are baby steps, but they're important. Okay? Now, that was one answer. Okay? There were other things going on that were said that related to activities that aren't just body, however. For instance, one person here, and this is not so different from what was said before, was, I feel warm. I feel warm. Now, that has a body component, right? Because the perception of warmth is a bodily perception. It's one of our, we have the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body as a whole. And the sensation of warmth is something that comes, comes to us through the gateway of our, physical sense that pervades our entire body. Okay? But together with that sensation of warmth, there's also a sense, whether it was expressed particularly or not, a sense of either liking it or not liking it. In other words, if the room is getting stuffy, saying I feel warm has a kind of a negative connotation. I don't really like being this warm. But if we've been cold up till now, and finally we're in a nice, warm, comfortable room, then I feel warm has a positive connotation to it, right? There's an interpretation going on of that experience. It is not just a physical sensation, but it's a relation to that physical sensation. Okay? Well, what is it? What quality of our being makes such interpretations, experiences such feelings of liking or disliking, of pleasure or pain? What is it that experiences that? I think I heard someone say. The mind. The mind, what we call the mental sense. You know, we have 5 physical senses. The eye perceives colors and shapes, and the ear sounds, and the nose smells, and the taste, a few various tastes, the tongue, tastes, and then the body as a whole, all manner of physical sensations like sharp and dull, smooth and rough. What else do we have? Hot and cold, like that. Okay. So there's these 5 physical senses, but there are things that we know through another sense, through a 6th sense. And the 6th sense is what we, very loosely refer to as our mind, our consciousness. These 5 that I mentioned are 5 physical consciousnesses, but there's a 6th one in addition. Okay? Let's get a little bit closer to the 6th one, because as Sarah pointed out in her question, things very often keep coming back to that. We can get rid of a lot of things, but this 6th one is kind of annoying. It's irritating, because it keeps coming back into the equation in all manners of different forms, all right? So let's try to look at this one a little bit closely. Here's an example of something that may be something I just heard last week from a teacher that I'm receiving training from right now named Alan Wallace. Some of you have read his books. And he was describing a situation which helps us differentiate between simply sensations, sensations that we might pick up through our bodily sense, and feelings or reactions that are coming in through the mental sense. Okay? So I'll just repeat what he said, because it was kind of an eye-opener to me. If next to me is a woman that I'm very friendly with, a very good friend of mine, an intimate relation, my wife or someone like that, and I put my hand on her shoulder, then she experiences physical sensations coming from her shoulder region, right? And she could describe them in any number of ways, physical sensation. If you want to get a sense of that, just touch your shoulder, and there's a physical sensation, right? Okay. Now, if we're friends, and she knows the touch is coming from me, and is meant with affection, then her interpretation of this, her response to that, might be a feeling of pleasure, of comfort, of this is nice. Okay? So there's a physical sensation, and on top of that is an interpretation that this physical sensation is pleasant, right? Is enjoyable, is comforting, something positive, right? The body picked up the physical sensation. It was the mind that interpreted it as pleasant. That sense of being pleasant is not inherent to those physical sensations, and we can prove that. Okay? Let's say, on the other side of this dear friend or relative of mine is sitting a stranger, a rather lecherous stranger. Okay? Then he goes and touches her in the same area, right? So the physical sensations that are induced by this touching are exactly the same. They're indistinguishable. But mine are experienced as pleasant. His could be experienced completely the opposite, unwanted, unpleasurable, disgusting. Get away from me. Right? Can we imagine that situation? So the physical sensation is one thing and comes through the bodily sense. But the sense of finding it pleasurable or non-pleasurable or indifferent is coming through a different organ. It's not coming through the physical sense itself. And the organ that it's coming through, we simply call the mind. Okay? And we can even take this situation yet, we can expand on it a little bit. We can imagine being in some kind of, like I was in New York City recently, and you're riding the subway, and as you make your way in or out, you're kind of jostled by the crowd, and it's a natural event. And so during that, again, the area in your shoulder or your arm might be stimulated, causing the same or almost virtually indistinguishable physical sensations, but you would not find that, or let's say this person in question, this hypothetical woman that I've described, right, might not find that either pleasurable or unpleasurable, but rather neutral, indifferent, right? Because it's just another sensation. It isn't coming from someone I feel affection for, and therefore which I find pleasant. It's not coming from someone who's a rather, unsavory-looking stranger, which I find very unpleasant, feeling my boundaries have been invaded. It's not coming from anyone in particular with this motivation or that motivation. It's just naturally occurring as I'm entering or exiting the subway. The same physical sensations, now that's being interpreted with indifference, neutral. It's a neutral response. So that the sense of our response to what happens to us, pleasurable, painful, or we can say unpleasurable, and indifferent or neutral, this is not something which is coming to us through one of our physical doors. That doesn't come to us through our eye or ear or nose or tongue or body as a whole. It piggybacks on top of that, and it comes to us through our mind. So now, we are in the habit of using this one easy four-letter word, mind, to cover a vast array of functions, of processes. Right? Here, I was using it to relate to what the Buddhists call feeling, which is just a response to our experience. Now here, the Buddhist word, the Buddhist term, feeling, means something quite different from the way we usually use the word feeling in English. Feeling in English covers, there's thousands of feelings, right? Buddhism doesn't deny those reactions. They just don't call it by this term, feeling. Maybe a better translation for feeling, or something that narrows our focus a bit, is response. In some translations, feelings are called responses. And maybe that gets us away from our accustomed way of using the word feeling to refer to some other mental qualities. So from the Buddhist point of view, feeling or response is only of three types: pleasurable, painful, or neutral. That's the way we react to our experience. That's our response to our experience. Okay? There's other interpretations that we can make, but this is the basic way we respond. So when something happens, we either find that experience pleasurable, or we find that experience unpleasurable, that is painful, or we find that experience neutral. It doesn't arouse a positive or a negative feeling. It's neutral. It's just those three. Okay? So here, within a Buddhist context, when we use the word feeling or response, we're limiting ourselves to this. Okay? No one is feeling particularly deprived that the break was so short? No? You've got your glass of water and everything that you need? Right? Kinks out of your body? Good. No. Kinks out of your mind? Right, but then again, it'll probably take more than 2 hours too. Okay, thank you. So question arises: why am I investigating these feelings of pleasure, pain, and indifference? Because this is one aspect of what we give the title mind to, right? What I'm trying to bring out here is we use this one word, mind, kind of loosely, cavalierly, but it's actually referring to a whole series of different functions. Some of those functions seem to be related to qualities of thought and inspection and so forth that we kind of typically point to our head, like having to do with thinking and rational investigation. But some of these qualities, again falling under the general heading of mind, refer to things that we tend to think originate more from heart or have a heart quality to them. Okay? So, and then within these broad, very, very broad categories of mind, of head-related qualities and heart-related qualities, within that there are differentiations made. So, if we study Buddhist psychology deeply, the phenomena referred to broadly by mind itself is divided into four categories. Four categories. Okay? So when we investigate mind, we have to look into these four categories. It isn't just enough to just say mind in general. Okay? Now, these four categories are often referred to as the four aggregates or the four heaps. So again and again you'll hear these phrases, aggregates or heaps. So these are the divisions into which various mental functions are divided. Okay? So the first one of these four is what I've just simply, I've followed the common translation to refer to them as feelings, or alternatively as response. So one quality of mind is the response or the feeling that's aroused in relation to our experience, of either finding that experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay? And as I said, that is not something coming from the body. It's not something coming from a physical sense. It's in connection with a physical sense, definitely. It may be. Let me retract that. Cross out the definitely. It may be connected with a physical sense. It very often is connected with a physical sense. But it is not the physical sense itself, right? A feeling of pleasure is not the same as a touch on the shoulder. Touch on the shoulder is a physical sensation. Finding it pleasurable, finding it painful, finding it neutral is a mental response. Okay? So that gives us one aspect of the quality that we generally refer to as mind. Another one, another heap, another set of aggregates, another set of mental functions is broadly referred to as discernment, or alternatively, I've heard the translation recognition. Discernment or recognition. So here, just to give an example of this, the physical, the eye sense, looks out. So I'm looking here at this thing in front of me, and it's got a certain shape, quite a lovely shape actually, right? And then these other shapes coming off of it. And then there's colors. There's a kind of a pale yellow, a deeper yellow, a green, a white, pink color. So my eye sense is picking up shapes and colors. That's all my eye sense is picking up. My eye sense is not picking up flower, or this particular flower. Was this a calla lily? Is that what it's called? Okay. It's not. My eye sense is not picking up that. My eye sense is only responding to colors and shapes. That's its data. But piggybacking on top of that is my mental discernment. This is a flower, or, if I've learned something more about flowers, this is a calla lily. Okay? That discernment, that recognition that this is a flower, this is a calla lily, is not coming from my physical sense. It's not coming from this physical, visual sense, is it? It's coming from another sense, the mental sense. So, within the sphere of mental activities, in other words, activities of the mind, there are feelings, responses to our experience, and discernments or recognitions. This is this, that is that. Okay? The next aggregate of mind, it's really hard to give a name to. I've heard it called compositional factors. Any other translations for this aggregate? Yeah?
Mental formations.
Mental formations. Composition, formation, you see there's some kind of thread running there, right? There's names. My friend of mine, he coined the phrase, the aggregate of everything else. This is like a grab bag of aggregates. Because within it, there's a whole range of mental activities going on. All kinds of different attitudes. We've discerned that this is a calla lily, right? We've responded to it. In my case, right now, I find it pleasant. I might not find it pleasant if it was in front of me for hours and days. I don't know. But at the moment, it's pleasant. Sometimes it's neutral. Sometimes it doesn't arouse a feeling of either pleasure or displeasure. But at the moment, I'm discerning it as calla lily, and I'm feeling it as pleasant. Okay? But on top of that, I can have a whole bunch of different attitudes about it. Like, I wish it were a slightly different color. Or it's nicer than the flower that was here last week. Or I hope next week they choose something better. Or this, or that. All that kind of mental babble about it. There's a whole range of attitudes, of mental attitudes that I can have about this flower. And this all falls into that next aggregate, the aggregate of everything else, or compositional factors. Or what? Mental formations. Okay? So, even though the title for it may be a little bit vague, a little bit loose, it gives a sense. It's giving a shape to my mental experience. Right? Feeling just says, basically, it's impressing me as pleasant or unpleasant or as indifferent. That's all feeling is saying. But in this aggregate, now we're getting kind of very rich attitudes coming up, right? So in this aggregate, the one we're talking about now, occurs a lot of what we refer to normally when we say the word feelings in English. Okay? Is that clear? All right? Okay. And by the way, those who want to really research this topic, and it's not just an intellectually fascinating topic, but it really, really helps as we cultivate this wisdom of emptiness, because it gives us the terrain to investigate. Instead of investigating something vague, it really lays out for us very clearly what we're investigating. Okay? So for those who want to get into this deeper, this subject of these various aggregates and so forth are found discussed in general in the Buddhist teachings known as Abhidharma. Abhidharma, which is A-B-H-I, Abhi, which I believe means higher, and Dharma. All know Dharma. Abhidharma. So there's a lot of Abhidharma literature, which is this close investigation of our psychological reality and physical reality. And there's a lot of very extensive work in the Abhidharma that comes through the Theravada tradition, the tradition of Southeast Asia, and a lot of that has been translated into English. And there's a lot of excellent work that has come through the Mahayana traditions, such as the traditions of Tibet. And of all the various works, if you specifically check up the texts known as mind and mental factors, then a lot of what I'm discussing is defined there with great precision. Yes?
This reminds me a little of quantum physics.
Yes.
I just thought, I just dawned on that. It seems.
Yes.
Is that
Definitely.
Do you think that relates a little bit?
It relates on ever subtler levels, the more you go into it. And again, I quoted an example from Alan Wallace earlier. If you look up Alan Wallace's books on, one of them is called Choosing Reality. That's an excellent one, and there's a few other titles I could give you by him and by other workers. These are people who have had backgrounds as Buddhist monks and deep studiers of Buddhist philosophy, and also have studied physics, quantum physics. And the books that they're producing, it's remarkable, the connection between quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and the subject that we're discussing now. It's like the deeper you go, the deeper and more subtle the connection. It's quite fascinating. So you might really want to pursue that. And that's one book you might start with. There are other books I can mention too, but their titles are eluding my memory. I'll try to bring them in next week if you're interested. I'll try to look them up. Okay. So where was I going? Oh yes. So if you wanted to discern, the landscape of what I'm touching on now, texts under the category mind and mental factors are very, 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 very helpful here. And there's books which just have that title, Mind and Mental Factors. And again, I can come up with some other titles that you can look in if you want to investigate this more. And all of this generally comes under the literature known as the Abhidharma literature. Okay, so we have feelings as one aggregate, which defines one aspect of what we mean by mind or mental functioning. We have discernment, recognition, this is this, that is that. That's a mental function. There's all these attitudes, these mental formations, this isn't as good as that, I like this is making me angry, all those things, this makes me feel sweet and calm, this makes me feel agitated, all of that, that's this grab bag aggregate, the aggregate of everything else, or compositional factors. And then the last aggregate is simply called consciousness. Simply called consciousness. All of the others that were mentioned before, the other three, are aspects of consciousness, but this last one is called consciousness. And this is basic awareness. That's one way we can understand it. As we study these subjects more deeply, our definitions get more exact and precise. But for our purposes here, we can just think of this last aggregate, this last mental aggregate, consciousness, as our basic awareness. So for instance, in this level, in this respect, there are 6 consciousnesses. 6 consciousnesses. There's visual consciousness, right? It goes through the organ of the eye. It's related to the organ of the eye. It's visual consciousness, which is aware of what? And they're all awarenesses. All consciousnesses are awarenesses. So what's visual consciousness? It's awareness of color and shape. Okay? Then there's, what's it called? Auditory or audial consciousness? Whatever the proper Latin adjective is for ear, right? Audial, I think that's right. Audial or auditory consciousness, that's the awareness of sounds. Okay? Being aware of a sound is a function, it's a mental function. It's an awareness. Mediated through a physical sense. Okay? Then there is olfactory consciousness. That's a word I never heard of before I started studying Buddhism, but it's apparently a real word, olfactory. It means the consciousness of your nose. It's the consciousness that's aware of smells, of odors, olfactory. Okay? I think people who have studied anatomy, then they have things like olfactory nerves and things like that. So it's a real word, apparently. Okay? It's like the word auspicious. I never used the word auspicious until I started studying Buddhism. It's a good English word, but who uses it, right? Then you study Buddhism and everything's auspicious or inauspicious. Actually, if you're a good Buddhist, then everything's auspicious. Even the things that are inauspicious are still auspicious. Okay? And where are we up to? Then here's a good one, gustatory consciousness. Gustatory. That's the tongue, taste. So it's the awareness of various tastes. And apparently there's only a few tastes. I'm not sure, 6 or so? Bitter, sweet, pizza. Okay? You can look them up. Anyway, there's just a few tastes. Okay? Now, here, the tongue is an interesting organ because the tongue also can discern hot and cold, can it? But that's not gustatory consciousness. That's not taste. Because the tongue is part of the body, it has bodily sensations as well. So the tongue can feel smooth, it can feel rough, it can feel hot, and can feel cold, but none of those are tastes. Okay, so the tongue not only has the ability to pick up its own, own qualities of experience that no other sense can pick up. In other words, only the tongue can pick up, what is it, sweet, sour, bitter, and so forth. But it can also pick up textures and things which also can be picked up by your fingertips and other portions of the body. So when we look into these things, sometimes we have to discern what's really going on. Okay? And then the last one is tactile consciousness, which tactile consciousness pervades the whole body. Typically we think of it as being related to our fingers, because we touch things with our fingers. But we touch things with all portions of our body, don't we? We can pick up heat with our fingertips, with our elbow, with our back, for example. Feelings of rough and smooth like that. So these are all tactile consciousnesses. Sometimes it's referred to as the bodily sense, indicating the body as a whole. Okay? So there we have 5 physical... let me go back a beat. We have 5 physically based consciousnesses. These are 5 consciousnesses which are mediated, which become aware of their object through the medium of one of the 5 senses. Okay? So we become aware of color and shape through the medium of the eye. We become aware of sounds through the medium of the ear, and so forth. Okay? Is that acceptable? All right. But our awareness is not limited to those experiences that are mediated by a physical sense. So right now, there may be people in this class. Is anyone in this class the mother of anyone else in this class? No. Oh, then you have to step outside for this one. Okay. So with one exception then, okay, if I were to say to you, what does your mother look like? Or what did your mother look like if she's passed away? Okay? Then all of you would kind of go like this, right? And kind of, your eyes go up. But your mother's not up in the ceiling. You're not really looking at the ceiling for her, are you? Right? You're just averting your visual gaze to the side while you're thinking of your mother. And it may happen that an actual picture appears to your mind at that point, right? It might happen. Might not. Some people find it hard, but some people find it very easy. If I were to say, what does Mickey Mouse look like? Maybe for almost everybody, this picture that's always appears on people's sweatshirt pops up, or pepperoni pizza, something nice kind of and round with these little things, right? So there's now none of these things, your mother, with one exception, pepperoni pizza, Mickey Mouse, none of these are in the room. So none of these are available to anybody's eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body. Right? They're just not. But you're still aware of the object. You're still aware of an image of your mother, Mickey Mouse, a pizza, whatever it might be. How? How are you aware of something that's not available to one of your 5 physical senses? Right? How? Because it's available to the mental sense, to mental awareness. So that's why there are 6. That's why there are 6 consciousnesses. Thank God this is not a math class. That's why there are 6 consciousnesses in this last aggregate. There's 6 types of awareness. 5 are mediated through physical sense space. The 6th one is not necessarily. Okay? I think I see a question. Yeah.
So that consciousness does that consciousness necessarily have to be a physical object or concepts?
Yes, it does. It doesn't. Very good. It doesn't. The object of mental consciousness does not have to be a physical object. Fame. Right? Fame is a concept. And you can be aware of what fame refers to. But fame doesn't have a color or a shape or a taste or a smell. We can call it, sometimes poetically, we say things that are actually objects of mind have these qualities. Don't we? We say that poetically, like even in Buddhist teachings, they say morality has a certain smell. There's the smell of morality. But it doesn't really mean it's something that we're picking up with our olfactory sense. That's not what's really meant. It just means it has, and again, we often say something has a flavor to it, but it doesn't mean we're actually tasting it. Okay? So there are concepts, there's ideas, there's abstract items, which can be objects of the mental sense. Yes, mind can become aware of awareness. Yes, yeah. This actually becomes a very, very subtle point on the higher ranges of Buddhist philosophy. But it really only becomes relevant when you start discerning the difference between 2 of the very highest schools, the mind-only school and the Prasangika school, that there is a certain way of self-referential consciousness. And what is the quality of that, and does it actually exist? Or that becomes a very, very subtle argument. Okay, it's beyond us for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't serve any purpose here to go into it, and second, I don't fully understand it, so I'm not the person to explain it. Okay. Yes, please.
More on the difference between the physical senses and the consciousness. Physical senses, because you listed them twice. So auditory, for instance, the physical sense is just the fact that your ear can hear.
Is aware of sounds, right? That's the...
Well, but then, are you saying the consciousness is your mind interpreting that is a sound?
Oh. No, maybe my language was a bit sloppy there. I'm glad you pointed that out. I think my approach was a little bit sloppy. The visual awareness, okay, as now we're talking about this aggregate of consciousness or conscious awareness. Visual awareness is something that comes through the physical sense of the eye, but is a quality of awareness, is a quality of consciousness itself. In other words, it is mental. But it's mediated through the eye. But the reason that there are 6 is that 5 are mediated through the senses, the other one doesn't necessarily depend on the senses. It can exist without depending on the senses. The senses may not be operating, and still there can be mental awareness. So there's mental awareness in relationship to the physical senses, and mental awareness which is separate from the physical senses. So the mental awareness which is through the physical sense of the eye picks up colors and shapes, is aware of colors and shapes.
So that's not different than when we were first talking about the 5 physical senses. It's the same thing?
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
my mind is going in circles.
No, you're right. You're right, because there I was speaking in a very general manner. I hadn't yet divided up mind into these different qualities. So one way, maybe this might help a little bit. This last aggregate, just consciousness itself, one person once referred to it, one of my friends who was studying, he came up with this way of looking at it, and it may not be a final answer, but I think it's a helpful station to go through. Consciousness or awareness is picking up what we might call the raw sense data. The other aggregates, feeling, discernment, mental formations, are giving shape to that raw experience. So visual awareness, so there's that last aggregate, visual consciousness, visual awareness, is only aware of color and shape. But then we can have a certain response to it. You know, we can find that those colors and shapes pleasant, for example, or unpleasant, or neutral. We can discern it, like those are the attributes of a flower. You know, we can say it's this or that, or the color is yellow, or whatever. You know, a yellow, a green, the shape of a leaf, and so forth. We can discern it's this and not that. We can have a whole bunch of attitudes towards it, thousands of attitudes, some positive and some negative. I like it, I hate it, you know, so forth. I wish it were this, I wish it were that. Those are all attitudes towards the object. But the last one is just simply the awareness. Just as it strikes us naked, bare, like that. So the physical, the awareness that comes through the physical senses just picks up that raw data. It's the mental sense which then interprets it in these various ways. Is that helpful? I'm really glad you asked that, because I was not very clear the first time through. Yes?
Seeing how the sixth sense consciousness is completely separate from the 5 sense organs, because it seems like it's depending upon accumulated data or memory from those things in order to have an experience.
It often does. It often does. Often the mental sense, the sixth consciousness, okay, the last aggregate of those 6, take away the first 5, and you left with mental awareness or mental consciousness. Often that is working on the basis of remembered physical experience. It's true. But it is not being mediated at that moment necessarily through any of those. So you can remember the shape and the color of something, even though your eye is not at the moment picking up those shapes or colors. You can remember it. So memory is one aspect that helps make up, a quality of mental consciousness. Actually, memory in particular comes into that grab bag aggregate. that other aggregate. But anyway, these are details, that we can study more about. But I'd just like to give an overall picture. All right. So we've taken what we loosely refer to as mind, and we've divided it up into these four categories, or these four aggregates, right? Feeling, discernment, compositional factors, and consciousness. Okay? And we've done it in such a way that we have an idea of what's being referred to. All right? And I do urge people who really want to get into this deeper to study these topics more, where examples and details and so forth are given. Okay. Well, why? Why go to this trouble? Why learn this classification scheme? Okay. All right. Remember where we started. We started by saying, make a statement that you find verifiably true about I, about me, about your name. Use that in a sentence. So we came up, I'm 61 years old, I'm sitting, I feel warm, all of these other things. When we start investigating why that statement is self-evidently true, why we've come up with it, we discover that we're referring to one or more of these aggregate experiences. And now we have to expand it. We have to talk not about 4 aggregates, but 5 aggregates. Because the 5th aggregate is the body. Right? So when I say I am sitting, we can say that not because necessarily what the mind is doing. No matter how many categories we divide the mind into, that's not the basis of I am sitting, is it? Sitting refers to the posture of this body. So that's the missing aggregate. In fact, it's the first aggregate. The 4 that I've mentioned are aggregates 2, 3, 4, and 5. Aggregate 1 is the body, and it's called the aggregate of form. That's the name for it. So when, for instance, some of you have heard or read the Heart Sutra, and the essence of the Heart Sutra, it says form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Form there means the first aggregate, and it implies all the aggregates. It's just a shorthand version of referring to all of the aggregates, but instead of mentioning all 5 of them, it just mentions the first one. This happens again and again in Buddhist literature. Like we have a certain dedication prayer by practicing giving. What it means, giving, etc. Well, giving is the first of the 6 perfections. So instead of mentioning all 6, they just mention the first. So in the Heart Sutra, instead of mentioning all 5 aggregates at the beginning, they just mention the first one. Right? Then later they mention the others. Okay? So the first aggregate is form, which for all intents and purposes means our body. Okay? And the next aggregates, feeling, discernment, compositional factors, and awareness or consciousness, taken together are mental attributes, what we call mind. So, the point of the exercise is to ask ourselves, can we say anything about ourselves? Or do we refer, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. When we use I, or our name, or me, to describe something, isn't it the case that we're always referring to something taking place in one or more of these 5 aggregates? Or if you want to kind of use simpler language, kind of get away from all that kind of Buddhist-sounding terminology, the term I, isn't it the case that it's always referring to something going on either in the body or the mind or both? Okay? So body, mind, or both is the same as saying one or more of the 5 aggregates. Those are 2 equivalent statements. Okay? So use whichever one you find helpful. If you like this division into 5, 1 physical aggregate and 4 mental aggregates, if you respond to that, if it means something to you, use that. If that sounds like, something from another language, just use body-mind combination. Means the same thing. The advantage of using the 5 aggregates is it begins to break down this monolith mind. Right? And that's important. Because again, mind is just one short word. And we kind of tend to think that one short word is referring to one short phenomena. Like marker. This is my marker. Kind of a short, easy 2-syllable, 6-letter word, marker, right? And here it is. I can hold it in my hand. It's my marker, right? Mind is not like that. Mind is referring to a whole range of functions, mental functions. Right? And this division into 5 is just the beginning. That 4th aggregate, the grab bag aggregate, mental formations, when you start studying Buddhist psychology, there's 49 elements within that are discerned. That comes from the Indian tradition. It goes all the way back. It goes way, way back to people like Asanga and Vasubandhu and way, way back. And based ultimately on the teachings of Buddha himself. Right? So this is not a Tibetan, not something that they invented in the Buddhist monasteries. And it serves a very important purpose, which I'm kind of hoping I'll reach in the next 15 minutes. Because all of this has been preamble so far, folks. Get used to it. I never ever reach the subject matter, but my introductions are amazing. So the point here is when we use this term I, when we think of ourselves, when we refer to ourselves, when we defend ourselves, when we project ourselves, all of these, as we investigate what is the nature of that I, what am I, we are inevitably led to an investigation of the body and mind. Inevitably. Sometimes it's very obvious, like I've got a pain in my back, or I hurt, I'm in pain. And then the person asks why. He says, well, I've got a backache. Okay? So now I, that concept of I, is relating to something that's occurring in the first aggregate, the aggregate of form, right? Because it's part of my back. The back is part of the aggregate of form. And it's also relating to the mental response to it, finding it painful and so forth, finding that physical sensation painful. Okay? And so and it's only because we are referring to something that's taking place within the body or within the mind or some combination of both, that we can think in terms of I or self or me or make up a sentence or an idea with our name in it. Okay? Now this pronouncement shouldn't be accepted as true. That has to be investigated. Because it could be the case that I or me or self or my name is referring to something outside the body-mind complex. Could be. Certain possibilities that are raised there we can probably get rid of. Like I don't say I am sitting tall and straight because that pillar is holding up the ceiling. Right? Nobody ever thinks that. Right? Unless they're completely nuts. Right? Nobody would ever think that. Why? Because what we're referring to is there. You know, it's made out of glass and wood and metal and whatnot, and it's serving a function out there. It has nothing to do with my body. It's, you know, those elements there are not the elements of my body, not the same elements, are they? Right? So referring to its posture and my posture as being the same because it's holding up the building, I'm straight? No. We'd never think that. Okay? So the sense of I is evidently not outside of this body, mind, and complex in such a gross fashion, is it? Right? It's always, it is referring to something taking place here, on this side, on this side of the divide, within these aggregates. Okay? But now the question arises, and this is important to investigate, to really see. You know, that when we say or think I, or self, or me, or John, or Mary, or whatever our name is, we're referring to activities or functions or experiences arising within these 5 aggregates. Okay? And this is really, as a meditative practice, it's really helpful. In fact, that'll be kind of a homework assignment. In the process of this week, every once in a while, catch yourself when you use the word I. That's all I ask. And then ask yourself, why did I use I then? Why did I think that? Right? Because it wasn't like you came up with logical reasons and then you used I. You just spontaneously use I. And we use it every day. Right? And then try to discern where among the 5 aggregates that idea of I, you know, why among the functions of the 5 aggregates did this I arise? Or in relationship to what function among the 5 aggregates did that I arise? Okay? Just to discern it. And one of the things you'll notice is that it skips around a lot. Sometimes when you use I, you're really concentrating on a bodily, physical reality, and sometimes you're really concentrating on a purely mental reality, and sometimes it's a combination of both. And then within the mental realities, there's all these divisions. So it's very, very helpful every once in a while, during the day, catch yourself using the word I, and if you can, at that moment, investigate. If you can't investigate it at that moment, you know, kind of write it down in your memory, and then later the day when you're sitting alone, repeat that sentence to yourself and try to see the relationship between the use of that term I and an event in one or more of the 5 aggregates. Okay? Try to do that a couple of times each day. Not a big assignment, but just to become aware. Yes, I think I saw a question.
In the Tibetan language, are there a lot of different words for the I they are referring to? For example, when you say, in English, we just say, I am fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how are you? I am fine. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you might be walking around with a broken leg,
Right.
but you still might say, I am fine.
I
And
don't...
also, I mean,
Yeah. I think I understand the question. I don't know enough about Tibetan to answer with certainty, but I think that simply they have a term, nga, which is I, and I think it's pretty much serves the same purpose as I does in English. I don't think there's a big, a different term. I may be wrong about that, but I don't think so. Okay. Now, yes? I could be obnoxious and say who, but I won't. I'll be obnoxious anyway, but not in that way.
I was thinking about what we're talking about. It seems like it has to always do with someone else. When you say I, you're telling another person something about you.
But that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Because you could be in a room by yourself, and even though you don't say to anybody else, I feel cold or I feel lonely, you can be thinking that, you know. And even if your language is let's say you're a very young baby and haven't developed language skills, let's say, That doesn't mean a baby is devoid of feelings of I. Right? It's not a language question. We're using language to take these baby steps to uncover it, right? Because now at our age, our thinking is mediated through language to such a large extent, right? But it's not. This isn't just a semantic thing. It's a sense of self, and this is where I'm getting at. And we only have a few minutes, so let's just finish this line of thought, and then we'll dedicate and break to be continued later. Okay. So. So the question is, when we think I or self, are we necessarily thinking about something going on in the this body-mind complex, in these five aggregates? And that's something to be investigated. I've thrown out that it is, that it always comes down to that, but we have to investigate, is that true? Why do we have to investigate that? And why is this an important topic? Because it kind of seems like it's not leading us anywhere, And the question comes, so how is this helpful? How is any of this helpful? Okay. I'm going to go back to Lama Zopa here, see if I find it. I'm going to read from, if you don't have it in front of you and you want to look at it later, it's in the middle of the third paragraph. Lama Zopa says, let me read the entire paragraph. I was going to read just a sentence in the middle. Let me read the whole thing. Each of us has this instinctive conviction of a concrete, independently existing I. In my copy it says the number 1, but that's a misprint. It should be I. Okay? Each of us has this instinctive conviction of a concrete, independently existing I. Okay? When we wake up in the morning, we think, I have to make breakfast, or I have to go to work. Thence arises the powerful intuition of an I, which exists in its own right. That's something we're going to investigate more. That exists in its own right. And we cling to this mistaken belief. If someone says, now this is really getting to the crux of the matter here. If someone says, you're stupid, or you're intelligent, this I, right? Which I? This supposedly concrete, independently existing I. This I that seems to exist in its own right. Okay, that's the I that Rinpoche is referring to here. This I leaps forth from the depths of our mind, burning with anger or swollen with pride. This strong sense of self has been with us from birth. We didn't have to learn it from our parents or teachers. It appears, and this is the sentence I was going to read by itself, it appears most vividly in times of strong emotion, when we are mistreated, abused, or under the influence of attachment or pride. It appears most vividly in times of strong emotion, when we are mistreated, abused, or under the influence of attachment or pride. So, we're not here talking about a garden variety of I. Just ordinary, what is sometimes referred to in the teachings as the conventional I. Okay? The conventional I is not causing us a problem. If I'm seated here and I say, I am sitting, and if I investigate that deeper and I say, well, I can say I am sitting because my body is sitting, and I'm using I simply to refer to what my body is doing, no problem whatsoever. It's just a convention. I'm using I as a conventional name to refer temporarily to what's going on in this body configuration. I am sitting. No problem. Okay? I here is just a mere designation. This is something you'll hear again and again. A mere designation or a mere imputation upon the five aggregates. Okay? And used in that way, no problem whatsoever. Where does the problem come? Remember, all these teachings on emptiness, all Buddha's teachings on wisdom, were to serve one purpose, and one purpose only, to uproot the root cause of suffering and dissatisfaction and bring us a sense of calm, happiness, well-being, and fulfillment. Other than that, they serve no purpose. Okay? So, at times of strong emotion, what we discern, if we investigate very carefully, is a sense of self which is not this conventional I. It's not just a name applying to what my body's doing or a name applied to what my mind is doing, is it? It's an I which seems to exist in and of itself as most real. It seems at that instant to be quite separate from body and mind. Right? If all the I were, if we were only dealing with the I which is just a name applied to what's going on in the mind or what's going in the body, we'd have no problem. But what we're holding on to is not that I. That I is not the problem. We're holding on to what's sometimes called the false I. The problem with the false I is it seems most real. Like if someone were to come in this room and say something about me in front of all of you that was either untrue and very unflattering, or true and very unflattering, and there's many things like that could be said, okay? Then I wouldn't feel this person is insulting something going on in my mind or something going on in my body. He's not insulting an I that's referring to a physical characteristic or a mental characteristic. He's insulting me. He's insulting the famous John Landau. Right? And at that moment, the famous John Landau is this thing that I've been cherishing since I was born. Right? And if you want to extend it, since before I was born. The reason I was born is because I'm cherishing and holding on to a sense of self which appears to be independent, separate from the body and mind on which the I is imputed. Okay? It's most real. It pops up. The image that is sometimes used is in India when they go hunting in the forest for tigers. I may have used this in another context earlier, I don't remember. The beaters go out and they beat the bushes until the tiger jumps out and in the clearing, and then the hunter can take a shot at it and create the karma to be reborn as an animal that will be hunted. It's a wonderful sport. Okay, so but the image is wonderful. The image is beating the bushes until this sense, this dangerous object appears. Right? Well, what beats our bushes the most are these strong emotional states of either great unhappiness or great happiness. This severe emotional state causes this sense of I. Not I in the sense of just a name that I'm applying to what my body's doing or a name that I'm applying to what my mind is doing, but an I which at that moment is conceived as separate, independent of anything else. An I which seems to exist in its own right, right? The so-called self-existent I, the inherently existent I. All of these are synonyms in this usage here. The I that exists in its own right, the self-existent I, the independent I, and so forth. Okay? And what the Buddhist wisdom teachings are saying is that I doesn't exist and never existed. And the root cause of our suffering is that we believe it exists. So the root cause of our suffering is ignorance. We believe something which is not true. All I is a designation on what's going on in the body and the mind. That's all it is. It's what's referred to by the word I, applied to some activity in the body, some activity in the mind, or a combination. That's the conventional I, that's what exists. But the problem arises is that we instinctively hold on to an I which does not exist in this kind of dependent relationship upon body and mind, but which appears to exist how? Independently, concretely, from its own side, self-existently, in its own right, inherently. It's just a list of, for our intents and purposes, a list of synonyms, and they're all wrong. Right? And it's our belief, our grasping onto this kind of I, which is the root cause of our problem, and it's this type of grasping which comes to the fore in moments of great emotional turmoil, of stress and strain, of either great elation or great depression. Okay? So our job is to investigate what exists, what doesn't exist. Okay? To find out the nature of the I. So the homework assignment is simply this. Read again what Lama Zopa said. Now maybe read it with different eyes, because now I have a little bit of a feeling for what's going on there. Different eyes. EYES this time. Okay? Read it with a different consciousness based on the little we've gone over today. And then the other part of the assignment is catch yourself when you refer to yourself, either verbally to someone else or when you just think I, and either note at that time or mark it down for later investigation, what am I referring to? And try to find it. Try to find it within the body, within one of these mental aggregates, and see if you can discern it. And do that several times. If you could do that a few times each day, that would be excellent. Okay. So now, I did go a few minutes over, but not enough to be thoroughly ashamed of myself. But before we stop, here we've made an effort, a very sincere effort, according to our limited abilities. My limited abilities as someone understanding the teachings and being able to convey them clearly, very severely limited. And your limited ability, this is not a criticism, limited why? Because for most of you this is the first or one of the first times you've heard the teachings. So of course it's limited. New vocabulary and so forth. So, but within those limitations, within my limitations as a speaker and your limitations as a listener, okay, within those limitations, our efforts have been sincere, right? We've trying to discern the nature of reality. We're trying to uncover the root cause of suffering and dissatisfaction, to obliterate it from our mind so that we can benefit not only ourselves, but others. Okay? That is a meritorious activity. That effort, even if it's been clouded, even if it's been less than clear, the effort itself is positive. It's meritorious. It creates a positive energy, a meritorious energy. So, before that meritorious energy becomes dissipated or destroyed by a moment of anger or resentment, let us dedicate it so that all beings may be removed from their mental and physical sufferings, so that His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all teachers from every tradition revealing true paths leading to higher rebirth, liberation, and enlightenment may be endowed with long and fruitful lifetimes, so that we may come under the benevolent care of such compassionate Mahayana gurus in this and in all future states of existence, so that the enlightened beings inhabiting every corner of the universe continue to turn the peerless wheel of the Dharma, and so that we ourselves may swiftly attain a state of complete spiritual awakening, full enlightenment, so that we can best repay the infinite kindness that we've received from each and every sentient being. And I thank all of you for your extraordinary patience. Thank you. Good night.